Power is not always seized through violence. Sometimes it is stolen quietly, through a glance, a hesitation, a pause held too long. Machiavelli understood this long before psychology had a word for it. Most people betray themselves not through actions, but through emotions. Not through grand acts of disloyalty, but through the smallest cracks in their mask. And once you leak, you lose. The dangerous part is you rarely realize you are leaking. The emotions that betray you are not the obvious ones, anger, joy, or fear. They are smaller, quieter, hidden in casual words, fleeting expressions, delayed pauses. These tiny signals make you predictable, easy to read, and therefore easy to control. Machiavelli never tried to hide his surface. He buried his core. Because once someone understands what unsettles you, they own you, not through force but through insight. If you want a mind no one can manipulate, bend, or break, you must erase 3 emotions from your visible self. The first is eagerness. Eagerness is not enthusiasm. It is not drive. It is the desperate signal that you want something, approval, attention, opportunity, status, more than you are willing to admit. And in that signal lies your weakness. The moment you show eagerness, you create an imbalance of power. You have silently admitted, "You have something I want." That admission gives them leverage. This shows up everywhere: job interviews, relationships, negotiations, even casual conversations. You lean forward too quickly. You agree too easily. You answer before the question is finished. You praise excessively. You rush to prove you are worthy of being chosen. And in the act of proving it, you reveal that you are not. Machiavelli would say, "The one who chases is already beneath the one who withholds." Eagerness makes you readable, and once you are readable, you cannot be mysterious. And mystery is half of power. When you walk into a room with eagerness in your eyes, people instinctively devalue you. They may not say it, they may not even know why, but they feel it. Your need gives them confidence, and your detachment in reverse makes them uncertain. That is where control begins. To kill eagerness, you must train yourself to slow down. Not your thinking, but the expression of it. Pause before speaking, nod sparingly. Let silence sit where others rush to fill it. Give the impression that you are calculating, not convincing. Because in every environment, the person who appears least eager always appears most in control. Not because they have more, but because they need less. Think of how often you've revealed eagerness in texts sent too fast, in double messages when someone didn't reply, in compliments that sound like begging, in showing up too early, in saying yes too quickly. That isn't confidence, that is exposure. And Machiavelli would warn, never expose anything unless it works to your advantage. The second emotion is even more dangerous because it hides under the mask of authenticity. It is conflicted admiration. That subtle glance you give when you respect someone yet resent them for holding what you desire. It shows up as backhanded praise, as compliments laced with comparison, as aligning with people slightly above you while never fully accepting their superiority. And once someone senses this, 2 things happen. They realize you want their position, and they realize you will never truly support them. From that moment, you are not an ally, you are a disguised threat. This emotion is poison because it springs from insecurity but hides beneath admiration. And even casual observers can feel the tension. Your words say one thing, your tone says another, and that fracture is enough to destroy respect. Machiavelli would have crushed this in anyone around him because he knew to admire what you envy is to bow to it, and to resist it is to reveal your weakness. True power demands that you either admire completely or not at all. Never both. If you study someone, do it silently without flattery, or do it openly with grace, free of resentment. But never let both emotions live in you. This limbo of respect mixed with resentment is how others see straight into your conflict. And once they do, you are no longer solid, you are glass. To destroy this emotion, examine your comparisons. Who do you secretly watch? Who do you praise yet feel tense around? Who makes you feel small even if you deny it? That is the feeling you must erase, not because it is evil, but because it is visible. And visibility is vulnerability. The third emotion is the most dangerous of all, the one nearly everyone reveals without realizing it, the one Machiavelli would have called fatal. It is anticipatory doubt, not fear. Fear is a reaction. Fear comes after a threat. Anticipatory doubt is what leaks before anything happens. It's the subtle drop in your voice before you ask a question, the hesitation before you decide, the little disclaimer that slips out before you speak. I might be wrong, or this probably won't work, but I'll try. You don't notice it, but everyone else does, especially those looking for a chance to challenge you. Anticipatory doubt is the emotion of someone who has already rehearsed failure, not outwardly but internally. And it leaks through posture, through energy, through the way you look at someone when you present an idea, almost as if you're begging for permission. It shows in the way you reject yourself before anyone else has the chance to. Machiavelli would have called this suicidal, not because it makes you weak, but because it invites attack. It broadcasts to everyone, I don't fully believe in myself, so if you want to test me, now is your chance. And whether in politics, power, relationships, or everyday life, that signal is enough to trigger predators. Confidence is not about being right all the time, it's about never flinching. And when doubt leaks from your presence, you awaken in others the instinct to test your authority. Not always out of cruelty, sometimes unconsciously, but the outcome is the same. You lose control. This is why those who speak more slowly, pause longer, and project conviction, even without superior intelligence, are seen as leaders, not because they know more, but because they reveal less conflict within themselves. That is what people respond to. To erase anticipatory doubt, you must stop narrating your insecurities. Kill the reflex to seek approval before you act. When you have an idea, state it. When you feel uncertain, act calmly anyway. When challenged, don't rush to defend. Let others sit in the weight of your silence. Power is not found in constant answers. It is found in the absence of anxiety behind them. And here's the deeper truth Machiavelli understood. Eagerness, conflicted admiration, anticipatory doubt, these emotions are human. You cannot always stop them from existing, but you can stop them from leaking. That is the game. Not to erase emotion, but to erase exposure, because people are not mind readers. They are body readers, energy readers. They watch how you breathe, how you pause, how your voice shifts when the topic changes, how many times you say, I don't know, how you look when someone challenges you. Every micro shift is a message about how breakable you are. Your task, if you want an impenetrable mind, is to shut down the signal. Mute the leak, not with fake toughness, but with deliberate presence. Every word must feel chosen, every gesture intentional, every silence purposeful, because the less predictable you are, the more powerful you become. The less they know what moves you, the more they must guess, and guessing drains energy. That is your edge. You become unreadable. And once you're unreadable, you're uncontrollable. And here's what happens next. Once you strip these three emotions from your visible behavior, you don't just feel stronger, you become stronger. People start giving you more space, interrupting less, asking your opinion with more caution because they no longer know where you stand. And mystery creates gravity. It pulls people in, not with noise, but with silence. Machiavelli would have called this the art of concealment, not hiding your entire self, but concealing the parts that can be weaponized against you. He knew every empire crumbles when the ruler becomes too visible, too emotional, too familiar, so he taught leaders to build walls, not of stone, but of behavior. Walls of pause, of posture, of patience, walls designed not to shut people out, but to control what they see when they enter. You don't grin at everything. You don't laugh at every joke. You don't rush to clarify when misunderstood. You allow tension to breathe, and in that tension you gain dominance, not through aggression, but through stillness. You become untouchable, not because you fight harder, but because you leave nothing to strike. That is the mark of someone truly formidable, not the one hiding in shadows, but the one standing in plain sight, revealing nothing. And once you strip away eagerness, conflicted admiration, and anticipatory doubt, the world begins to respond differently. Not because you are louder, not because you are harsher, but because you are unreadable. And unreadability is frightening to the weak, irresistible to the powerful. You walk into a room and suddenly no one can pin you down. Are you impressed? Are you threatened? Are you even interested? They don't know. So they adjust, they try harder, they reveal more of themselves just to pull a reaction from you. And in that reversal, you move from the one being judged to the one in control. That is what Machiavelli envisioned, a mind that cannot be cracked, even under pressure, a presence that cannot be bent, even by those with leverage. Because in a world overflowing with emotionally transparent people, desperate to connect, to justify, to be understood, the one who withholds becomes a fortress. Not cold, not heartless, but unreadable. That is what unsettles others. That is what earns respect even when they cannot explain why. This doesn't mean you strip yourself of humanity. It doesn't mean you kill empathy or the ability to connect. It means you decide when to reveal and when to withhold. You move from automatic expression to calculated revelation. Every response becomes a choice, a signal, a deliberate act of power. When someone praises you, you nod once, not because you dismiss them, but because you don't need their validation. When someone insults you, you don't defend. You let the silence stretch. You let them scramble to fill it. The longer they talk, the more insecure they become. When someone boasts in your presence, you remain motionless. That stillness cuts through their performance deeper than any reply could. Because the moment you stop trying to prove or react, you step outside the reach of manipulation. And that immunity radiates. People feel it. They cannot pull you into their frame. They cannot bait you. They cannot pin you down. Instead, they circle you, not out of fear, but because your silence forces them to reflect. Machiavelli would say, this is the point where power begins to sustain itself. You no longer chase control, you attract it. You no longer display strength. Your restraint becomes strength. And above all, you no longer hand out the blueprint of how to break you, because that's what these three emotions are. Blueprints. Eagerness reveals where you are desperate. Conflicted admiration reveals where you are insecure. Anticipatory doubt reveals where pressure will crush you. But erase those signals, and there is no seam to pry open, no weakness to exploit. You are still human, still feeling, but from the outside nothing leaks, and that makes you unsettling. Unsettling is power. It makes people cautious with you. They plan their words more carefully, they tread more lightly, and in that careful space you gain time. Time to observe, time to assess, time to decide who deserves entry and who does not. Because once your mind becomes impenetrable, you see clearly who tries to slip into it. Not with force, not directly, but psychologically, through flattery, rivalry, emotional baiting, subtle digs. But none of it works, because there is nothing to grip. You remain steady, composed. You don't explain your goals. You don't justify your detachment. You don't share your opinions until you've measured the room. And when you do speak, it lands, precise, final, decisive. You don't speak to explore. You speak to direct. Machiavelli would warn, he who reveals his mind too easily will always be ruled by those who understand it better than he does. And that is the downfall of most people. They think spilling everything makes them honest, noble, transparent, but it only makes them vulnerable to interpretation. The more you reveal emotionally, the more space others have to redefine your motives, your limits, your worth. But give them nothing, and they're forced to judge you by your actions. And actions, unlike emotions, can be shaped, controlled, designed. This is why those with true power never narrate their feelings. They don't announce, "I'm nervous." They don't sigh dramatically, hoping to be noticed. They don't admit, "I feel off today." That's exposure at its lowest form, emotional charity, and it always costs more than it gives. Instead, they breathe tension like air. Their expression does not change. Their pace does not falter. Their posture does not collapse. And that consistency intimidates because it is rare, and rarity builds status. If you want to rise, become rare. If you want to dominate, become unreadable. If you want an impenetrable mind, begin here. Stop leaking signals to those unworthy of reading you. Once you silence the leaks and weaponize your restraint, something greater awakens, not just power over others, but power over yourself. This was Machiavelli's highest aim, not external dominance alone, but internal sovereignty. Because the truth is, most people are ruled by their reflexes, not by chains, not by threats, but by habit. They feel, so they express. They want, so they chase. They doubt, so they hesitate. And with every reflex they broadcast the pattern that can be turned against them. But you are no longer that person. Now, before your mouth opens, your mind measures. Before your face reacts, your discipline intervenes. You don't speak from impulse, you speak from position. When people notice they can't predict what will impress you, provoke you, or move you, something changes. They elevate you in their own minds without even realizing it. Because unpredictability creates hierarchy. The harder you are to read, the more powerful they assume you are. And the truth is, they're right. When you stop bleeding emotions into every interaction, you stop leaking energy. You conserve power, and conserved power compounds. Your words start to weigh more. Your presence sharpens. People begin preparing themselves before speaking to you. Not because you're cruel, but because you've trained them to respect your silence. You've conditioned them to approach you with intention, not noise. This is how real influence is created, not by shouting, but by being the hardest to move. And this is where Machiavelli's brilliance becomes clear. He didn't glorify coldness, he glorified control. He understood that those who are emotionally transparent are the easiest to manipulate. The goal was never to kill emotion. It was to contain it, refine it, delay its release until it can be used as a weapon at the exact moment it matters most. You still feel eagerness, but you don't display it. You still feel admiration, but you don't let it twist into envy. You still feel doubt, but you don't project it before it's tested. This is the essence of the impenetrable mind. You feel everything, but you reveal nothing. And in that silence, the world loses the ability to calculate you. Let them try. Let them dissect every pause you take, every withheld glance, every delayed nod. The more they try to decode you, the more uncertain they become. And uncertainty breeds hesitation. That hesitation is your edge. While they hesitate, you decide. While they guess, you act. While they scramble to read you, you're already 3 moves ahead, executing what they never saw coming. This is how power grows in the empty space between emotion and expression. You begin to realize your silence is louder than most people shouting, that your refusal to be provoked is more intimidating than any display of anger, and that the most dangerous person in any room is never the one yelling, it's the one who can stand in the fire without flinching. This is the posture of rulers, of tacticians, of those who don't just survive the game, they rewrite it. But let's be honest, this way of living comes at a cost. You will lose people, those who crave immediate access to your thoughts. Those who demand constant reassurance and easy emotional connection. They will call you distant, cold, even arrogant. Let them name what they can't reach. Because connection built on exposure isn't connection, it's consumption. People who only value you when you bleed are not allies. They're addicts. You weren't born to feed other people's emotional hunger. You were born to build, and building requires energy. Building requires clarity. Building requires silence. So you build without announcing. You rise without performing. You cut emotional leakage not to be hollow, but to be precise. And soon, those who once demanded your openness will either drift away or evolve. They'll either learn to respect your boundaries or be replaced by those who do. Because a mind like this doesn't attract everyone. It drives most away. And that's exactly the design. An impenetrable mind isn't adored by the masses. It's respected by the few. And respect endures in ways attention never can. There's a shift that happens once you've mastered silence. People begin to look at you differently, not just with curiosity, but with caution. They can't place you, they can't map your depths, and that mystery turns you into a mirror, reflecting back their own insecurities. You haven't accused them of anything, you haven't attacked, but your unreadability forces them to confront their own emotional leakage, and they despise it. That's where real psychological gravity is born, because your presence no longer asks for attention, it commands it, not through volume, not through charm, but through the sheer absence of permission. You don't open your inner world to everyone. You make them earn it, and by doing that you reverse the entire dynamic. They crave your approval, they seek your reaction, they want entry. And that craving bends them. It makes them cautious, deliberate, and careful. That is power. And Machiavelli would remind you that power never comes from being liked. It comes from being regarded as dangerous. Dangerous doesn't mean violent. It doesn't mean cruel. It means unreadable, precise, and steady. When someone tries to provoke you, guilt you, or measure your reactions, and none of it lands, they begin to adjust themselves around your presence. You stop being just a person. You become a force. And forces are not argued with. They're adapted to. The emotions you've cut off, eagerness, conflicted admiration, anticipatory doubt, were never the flaw themselves. The flaw was in their timing, in how openly you displayed them. You gave people the tools to manipulate you. But now, you don't even show them the doorway. And this shift, this evolution, doesn't only change how others interact with you, it transforms how you see yourself. You notice how often you once betrayed your own strength by over-explaining, over-apologizing, overreacting. How you tried to be relatable instead of unreachable. How you aimed to be included instead of unforgettable. That version of you is gone. Now you move with deliberate restraint. You know that presence itself is leverage. And every word, every expression, every gesture either sharpens that leverage or dulls it. So you sharpen. You don't rush to fill silences anymore. You don't soften your intensity just to make it palatable. You don't dilute your discipline to make others comfortable. You embody the stillness of someone who doesn't need to be understood, only respected. That's the edge, and it unsettles people. They scan your face for cracks. They push to see if you'll bend. They talk more when you say less. Why? Because they're desperate to regain control. But every second you remain still, they realize they don't have it. This is when you become dangerous, because you're no longer playing the game of emotions. You're playing the game of energy. And your energy is no longer a switch they can flip with praise or dim with rejection. It's fixed. It's yours. It moves only when you decide. That's what makes you impenetrable. Still, people will test you, especially when they can't read you. They'll dangle bait, hoping you'll chase. They'll bear false vulnerability, hoping you'll mirror it. They'll try to provoke guilt or flatter you not to bond, but to break your frame. Don't give them what they seek. Let the bait rot. Let the silence stretch. Let the tension swell until it fractures them, not you. Because when someone tries to find your edge and comes up empty, they start to believe you have none. And that illusion is power. Not brute force, not loud proclamations, but the quiet, steady erosion of their confidence in controlling you. Once they lose that belief, obedience follows. Not obedience born from fear, but from respect. Because they see clearly now, you don't need them. You don't need their praise, their applause, or their approval. You've built something beyond charm. You've built presence. And when that last piece falls into place, when your emotions no longer leak, when your energy cannot be swayed, when your silence cuts sharper than any reply, you cross a threshold. You stop being viewed as just another figure in the room. You become something felt before you speak, something people can't define but instinctively respect or even fear. This is the ultimate level of Machiavelli's philosophy, not just to study power, but to embody it, because an impenetrable mind doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It creates an atmosphere where disrespect doesn't even enter thought. People don't challenge you, not because you threaten, but because you cannot be read. And what cannot be read cannot be predicted. What cannot be predicted cannot be controlled. That is where real dominance begins. You become the one others adjust themselves around, the one whose opinion is sought but never begged for, the one whose validation carries weight precisely because it isn't handed out. Around you, people measure their words. They choose them more carefully. They frame their questions with more thought. Not because you scare them, but because your calm forces them into awareness. And awareness itself is submission. Machiavelli understood that rulers rarely fall to the sword. They fall to the mirror. They expose too much. They speak too freely. They react too quickly. And in doing so, they supply their enemies with the very weapons that destroy them. But you, no, you give nothing. Not your doubt, not your longing, not your envy. Those doors are sealed. What remains is stillness, and stillness that cannot be pierced is power that cannot be challenged.